Hello and welcome back to the Jag Bros podcast. I'm one of your hosts, JT Raymond, alongside my two brothers, Jack and Joey. This is the time of year that for over a decade, the Jaguars looked at as their Super Bowl. It felt like year and year and year we were having a top 5, sometimes a top 2 pick. And boy, it feels nice to be picking in the mid-teens this year, at least from a marginally successful season relative to where we've been before in the past. How are you guys feeling about our draft spot?
It's a pretty good draft spot. I feel like we're in a position to where if we need to, we can move up. We're in a great spot. If depending on how people draft, we could move back and get some more draft picks in the later rounds, or we could stay put and get a really solid pick as well. It's kind of, we play our own game. Like, it's a really good spot to be, and we can kind of dictate what we want to do.
I think every Jaguars fan would hope that we were drafting later, meaning that we made the playoffs and potentially even made a run. But it is a good year to have a higher draft pick at 17 and then at 48 in the second round, because I do think this draft class is stacked and it's loaded at a lot of positional needs that the Jags have. So I've been watching a lot of the NFL Combine, getting ready. Shout out to my wife, Ashley. She watched, I think, 6 or 7 hours of the Combine, watched all the defensive tackles run their 40-yard dash. At the time, we hadn't picked up Armstead, so I thought that may be a bigger positional need for us. But it should be a big draft, and especially with the move from the Texans just a few days ago to go and trade for Diggs, I think this has to be a huge draft class for the Jaguars if we want to be viewed as a contender in the AFC South.
Well, fortunately, this is a draft class that many are attesting as one of the greatest wide receiver classes ever. And so there's a lot of folks to talk about. There's going to be some disagreements. I'm going to say this now, that Jack and Joey have put in by far more work into the offseason and how some of these guys have done on senior days, in Pro Bowls, and some of the other buzz. I have probably watched more college tape of these guys, so it'll be a really interesting discussion when we start thinking about some of the guys that the Jaguars could be targeting. And so for this episode, we're going to be looking at a couple of things. Number one, we're going to look at overall, what does the success look like for the Jaguars in the draft? What should our strategy be? What would you like us to do with those picks? Number two, we're going to drill into rounds 1 and round 2 and maybe a little bit round 3. Hey, look, if anything hits in round 4 through 7, that's great. Historically, Jacksonville has not been great at finding some of those diamonds in the rough outside of Gardner Minshew. But guys, let's start. What is success in your eyes for the Jaguars draft here this month?
Success in my eyes is, I think we only need to hit twice, and that is at wide receiver and cornerback, which luckily those are the two biggest spots in this draft. Cornerback is really deep and very good, and then wide receiver is also extremely deep and very good talent coming as well. I do think we'll need some sort of backup in the O-line, D-line, and edge, but those won't need to be an absolute hit like the wide receiver and cornerback positions will be.
You know, Joey, you're using that language hit, and it's got me thinking about baseball season just kicking off here a couple of weeks ago. And that's kind of how I view success for the Jaguars. Either they need to have a grand slam pick where you get a home run superstar day one impact player and a few other nice pieces, or you need a lot of hits, because the Jaguars need to score runs, to continue to use that baseball metaphor, because to me right now, they are clearly trailing the Houston Texans in terms of talent and depth. And so this has to be a really good draft class, either a home run superstar or 3 or 4 guys that are going to be very good players.
Yeah, I love what both of you guys are saying. I completely agree with it. Personally, I would rather see us go best available, especially at some of the key positions that Joey, you've already highlighted: wide receiver, defensive back. Personally, I think a defensive line, especially edge or some sort of pass rusher, you can never have enough pass rushers. You only gave Josh Allen a 1-year deal. we need to continue to beef up that room because right now we do not have a third edge rusher. And so finding somebody to contribute at that role would be ideal. And don't count out the fact that we might not trade up or trade for an additional piece, just like we saw last year where the Eagles got DeAndre Swift for, I believe, a third rounder. You've also seen the Titans trade away a first round pick to get AJ Brown, for the Eagles to get AJ Brown. Both of those trades were actually the Eagles. So I would love to see some creativity in that perspective to get an impact player.
Yeah, you mentioned it, JT. I do think a lot of Jag fans may know this, that a lot of rumors are going around about Brandon Ayuk and whether we will trade for him or not. Bulky's thinking the same way as we all are, that we need a number one wide receiver. If the wide receivers that we're looking for do go too early and we aren't able to trade up and get one, I do believe that is also a possibility to trade to the 49ers. Trade our pick to get Brandon Ayuk during the draft, not before the draft.
One other thing to remember too, and we mentioned it already several times, right? This is a deep class, both at wide receiver and at corner. But guess what? Last year was a deep class at tight end. We saw 7 or 8 tight ends taken in just the first 2.5 rounds alone. Just because it's a deep class also means that the chance of being a miss goes higher. All of these wide receivers are not going to hit. All of these corners are not going to hit. And so being able to differentiate between the Sam Laporta, who was an unbelievable rookie smashing a lot of records, and Brandon Strange, who got on the field maybe for 5 snaps a game, it felt like, that's going to be the difference. How do we avoid making those picks in a very deep class? Because if you're stuck with the Brandon Strange equivalent in the first and second round at some of those positions, we could be setting our franchise back a couple of years by missing on this draft.
I think that's the big question before you even get into looking at round 1 is what do the Jaguars do in terms of wide receiver? Because that's what all of us as fans are talking about. There's, of course, been a lot of rumors about Ayuk. The T. Higgins rumors have died down a little bit, but that's been a big deal of reuniting him with Trevor as well. And a lot of Jaguars fans are nervous because the past track record of drafting wide receivers just in rounds 1 through 3 has been terrible. In 2020, we took Chenault, round 2, 2018, DJ Chark, round 2, Marquise Lee, round 2, Allen Robinson, round 2, Justin Blackman in 2012, round 1, 2007, Mike Sims Walker, round 3, 2005, Matt Jones, round 1, 2004, Williams, round 1, and 2000, RJ Sauer, round 1. So we don't have a good track record. Most of those are bust or were other reasons that did not pan out. So are you viewing this as we need to go trade, or is the Jaguars' luck at wide receiver going to finally change in the draft?
I see it as kind of like almost like gambling. Just because you've missed so many times doesn't mean that you can't hit now. I do believe that if we do pick in the first round, these wide receivers are so good at the top that it's almost, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's almost impossible to miss with some of these wide receivers. Now, if we wait to the second to third round, your likelihood of picking up a dud is a lot higher. Like someone that I really think is a dud, that's people projecting second round, Ladd McConkey from Georgia. For some reason, he has a second round pick and he has no stats really from college. There's not that great of athleticism that I've seen from him. I don't know why they have him high, but there are a lot more possibilities in the second to third round to picking duds like him.
You're right, Joey. There's some can't miss guys, but the problem is I think most of those can't miss guys are in a tier of their own. And we'll break down those tiers here in a second. And I don't think we're going to have the luxury of being able to get one of those can't miss guys at 17. So do we trade up to go get one? Or do we take that pick and parlay that to try to get Brandon Ayuk or somebody else? I don't know. Personally, I'd rather see us not get cute or get too pushy, because if an edge guy that was slated to go top 10 falls to the mid-teens, go get that guy. If a corner that was slated to go top 15 falls to us, go get him and try to figure it out otherwise, even though the wide receiver is the one pick that I think most Jaguar fans want to make sure we find that number one, because I just don't trust our track record, and it's just really hard. A lot of these guys both have potential upsides, but also a lot of red flags and yellow flags associated with them too.
I don't know if I'm on the same page with you, JT, on the edge guy. I mean, it'd be nice to be able. I think that's a little bit too much of a luxury. We need a day one starter and wide receiver or corner. And if you go get an edge guy, he's only going to be playing about 40% rotating in with Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. So I do think that we do need an edge to rotate in, but I don't think we have the luxury of taking one that early. We need someone at 17 or somewhere in the first round who is going to be a day one starter like Anton Harrison was.
Well, let's kind of go day by day in terms of the draft. So we're a little under 3 weeks out from the NFL draft. So as we look at day one, Thursday night, Jaguars have pick number 17. What would you like to see the Jaguars do there? Now, of course, a lot of things are going to change, but I'll go ahead and give what I would love to see. I would love to see us trade into around pick number 8 or 9, where the Falcons, they have their quarterback. They be willing to trade back. You also have the Bears, who will, of course, draft Caleb Williams, number 1 overall. So they'll have their quarterback. They may be willing to trade back. I love that as a sweet spot for whoever the big 3. I think realistically, probably Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington, that could fall into that range and be not only a day one starter, but I think a day one wide receiver number 1 as a rookie for the Jaguars, and finally give Trevor Lawrence a wide receiver 1, because I just don't think he's had that since he's been a Jaguar. But what do y'all think? Do you think, would you prefer us staying at 17, potentially trading back and getting more capital, or trading up?
I love that, Jack, because I agree with you. How I rate these guys, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors are 1A, 1B, maybe slightly more for Marvin Harrison just because of name and reputation, et cetera. But Malik Neighbors has been incredible. I think Rome Odunze is just after those guys, but all 3 of them are in a tier of their own as far as what they look like in college on film, what they've done in the combines and post-college. If you can get one of those guys fit the mold for a true number 1. It would just be a massive get for the Jaguars. All of the other guys, they have potential to be a number 1, but again, they have a lot of question marks too. So I would love that if we could pull that off, and I wouldn't mind slightly overpaying to get there. If not, I'd rather see us probably go corner, maybe trade back and get one of the other wide receivers that are slated around the end of the first round.
Here's what's exciting right now is that the Jaguars have met with Malik Neighbors when he had his pro day at LSU. They were the only team outside of the top 10 to meet with him individually. And then they've also met with Rome Odunze at the combine. So you can see that Balky is at least considering big moves. He was interested in trading for Ayuk. He is having meetings with some of these top tier wide receivers. I just hope he's able to get it done, because it is going to be a challenge. I think you're going to see a lot of moves in the top 10, because you're going to have some teams trade up for quarterbacks. I think you could see a team like the Jaguars trade up for a wide receiver in this class. So I just hope we don't miss out on the excitement and potentially miss out on a star receiver like Rome, who I love too, because I think it's a great fit. He's a hard worker. There's the famous deal at the combine where he was the last person to leave because he wanted to keep getting a better time in the 3-cone drill. And so I think a guy like that is going to be a perfect fit for Trevor. They can work hard and be the future of the Jaguars for the next 10 plus years.
Yeah, I love Rome. My controversial take is that I believe Rome Odunze actually is the number 1 wide receiver in this group. I really don't like Marvin Harrison Jr.'s attitude. I think he's too big for his britches. I don't think he wants to put in the work. I think everything's just kind of been handed to him because of legacy, nepotism, and all that. I do know that he's amazing. Don't get me wrong. He has all the talent, but the attitude, the hothead, It's just not what Jacksonville needs, and it's just not what I want for this team. And then Malik Neighbors.
Joey, hold up, Joey. Before you go on to that, you know who else was the NFL legacy who was supposedly not a great fit for Jacksonville that we decided to pass on because he might have been entitled or whatever? Aiden Hutchinson, another guy who's got a multiple NFL legacy guy that we passed on. And oh, by the way, he's like an all-pro by year 2.
Yeah, and everything.
Aiden Hutchinson didn't decline to work out at the combine. He didn't decline not to do pro days. He didn't decline to even have interviews. Aiden Hutchinson has been a hard worker. There was never an image problem with him. Marvin Harrison Jr., like him and Caleb Williams, I don't know what is going on with them, but the whole attitude of, I don't need to do all this stuff. You either pick me or you don't type thing. This isn't that type of thing. The NFL, everyone is just as good as you are, if not better. You need to go out and prove yourself. You're going to have to continue to work. You have not arrived yet. You are back to a rookie. You're back to a freshman in college. They need to be willing to put in the work, not be like, oh, I already arrived. I'm already number one and all that. I want someone like Rome Odunze, who is the last one to leave, the person who's going to put in the work, who's going to be not, it's just me. Like, oh, I didn't get 12 balls thrown to me, so I'm going to throw a fit like Stephon Diggs. I want someone who is a team player, and whether he gets 100 yards or 50 yards, it doesn't matter as long as the team's winning.
I will say on Harrison, I agree with you 100%. I would love to see him work out. I'm very curious because everyone says he's an athletic freak, and that's what it looks like on the field. In terms of working out, not working out, unfortunately, I think that's more of just a trend we're seeing overall instead of just personality things. So like Neighbors didn't work out at the combine, but of course he did his pro day. And so I think this is just more of the direction of agents pushing this, because everyone says about Marvin Harrison as a dude, not that he's a hothead, but that he's actually extremely shy, that he's a quiet dude. So my guess is that someone, whether it's the Patriots at 3 or the Cardinals at 4, already have a handshake deal with him. And he's like, okay, well, I don't have to work out. I don't have to give other teams insight into my game so they can potentially game plan around you. But, you know, as a football fan, I want to see guys work out. I want to see what they can do. But I think, unfortunately, agents and other stuff are getting too involved, and it's getting annoying at that level.
Yeah, all right, I don't know how shy he is when he has Louis Vuitton cleats on. That doesn't seem very shy to me if you're wearing flashy boots like that. So
outfits and personalities are different things. Everyone's going to wear fancy stuff once you have money, and he's got a lot of money because of NIL deals.
So let's say we don't get our dream scenario. We don't get to move up to get one of those 3 guys. Most likely that means in the next let's call it 40 picks, we're going to be picking one of these next tier of wide receivers. So within that tier, according to most mock drafts, you have Brian Thompson Jr., a breakout wide receiver last year for LSU. You have Adonai Mitchell from Texas as well as Georgia. You have another Texas wide receiver in Xavier Worthy. You have another Georgia wide receiver in Ladd McConkey, who Joey's already highlighted. Keon Coleman from FSU, Troy Franklin from Oregon. These are all the guys that are in that next tier, if you will, in that late first to mid second round. Which one of those 1 or 2 guys would you be wanting to see Jacksonville take a risk on versus people that you would want us to really stay away from?
So I know a lot of fans love AD Mitchell. That's probably the leader in the clubhouse at pick 17, just in terms of fans right now. But I do think if AD Mitchell and Brian Thomas Jr. are on the board at 17, I love a trade back scenario, because I agree with you earlier, JT. I do think there's a big gap in terms of talent between the big 3 and some of these rest of these guys. And there is a gamble for both. AD Mitchell and Brian Thomas Jr. were amazing in their 2023 season, but they don't have a ton of great tape before that. Now, both of them are big dudes. They ran 4.3s, low 4.3s. So the potential is off the charts, but there is also potential for bust. And again, I come back to, you either need a grand slam in this draft or a lot of hits. And I just don't think you can afford to miss in the first round. So the guy I actually love the most is probably a dude that's going to be available in the second round, and that's going to be Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. He's 6'1", about 225. He's a little bit shorter than a lot of people thought, but a lot of people are comparing him to kind of a DK Metcalf just because of his pure athleticism. He ran a 4.3. He's a big dude, strong. He's got a great physical game, which I think the Jaguars would benefit a ton from. And yes, there's risk because he only had one great season as well. But I think it's a lot better of a gamble there in the second round than gambling in the first round. So I would actually go, if we miss out on drafting one of the big three, I would say go cornerback at 17 and then go get a Xavier Legette somewhere in the 40s.
I think Jack, I agree with you almost 100%. With that, I'm probably a little less bullish on Xavier Legette, but I see what you're saying. I think it's all about risk mitigation. The risk of picking someone in the mid-teens that is not one of those big three becomes astronomical. Because while Brian Thomas was great last year at LSU, he did nothing the previous 2 years, and almost all of his routes were simply deep. He was just faster than everybody. We just saw this last year with the Giants taking the Tennessee wide receiver Hyatt, who simply ran deep balls. He's a fast guy, but somebody that I'd be very concerned about. Adonai Mitchell, look, he wasn't even their go-to target at Texas. And some people will say, and Joey, you made this point already, that Ewers is not a great quarterback. Yeah, but Sark is a good offensive coordinator. And so if he thinks that he's actually more talented than Xavier Worthy, then why are they not scheming him open more frequently? And he's done nothing. Xavier Legette, man, he looked amazing this past year. And if you're taking him late second, early third, I think that's a great type of risk reward pick there for me. But he did truly nothing, not only in his previous 2 years at college, but his previous 4 years. He's actually a fifth-year senior, which you don't typically see those type of guys have a breakout that late in their career and turn out to be very good very good NFL players. So a lot of risk in there. If we don't make a move for the top three guys, I'd rather just see us take one at the end of the second or even in the third round with somebody like a Ricky Pearsall that could end up being your tank down.
Ricky Pearsall's not making it to round 3, at least not where we are at 96. I do agree on A.D. Mitchell as probably a bit overhyped. Going back, rewatching UT football, being from the Big 12, watching a ton of Big 12 football, he is a Keon Coleman. Like, he catches contested balls. His bread and butter was fades. You throw it up and he'd go up and catch it, which is important, but it's not something you go get in the first round. In the first round, you want a wide receiver that can do everything. It's not just a one-trick pony. So I'm with you. If we're not able to get the top three, I'm a little higher on Brian Thomas Jr. At 17. If he's there, I would probably get him. But if not, then definitely a cornerback. And then in the second round, I really like one of the guys that the Jags have brought in for their interviews, Des Walker from North Carolina. I think he's a great late second round, possibly early third round if we trade back for a pick. He did really well in the combine. He's 6'3", 200 pounds, 7 touchdowns, 700 yards this year, 900 yards and 11 touchdowns the year before that. I think he's very solid. I don't think he is like a number 1 wide receiver, but I think he's a very solid number 2 that could transform into a number 1, someone that can grow with Trevor. So I do like him a lot as well, maybe in that later second, third round.
Yeah, Joey, that's a name I haven't heard a lot for second round, but I think he is climbing some of the boards. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Troy Franklin is another guy who is a speedster out of Oregon who has limited tape, but at times has flashed. He's another guy that just keep your eye on. If the Jags do end up taking him, I wouldn't be upset, but it's not somebody I'd be banging the table on either. Is there anybody else in the third or fourth round that you guys have your eye on if we don't go wide receiver with our first couple of picks?
Yes, I think that there are a few really good steals if they drop to the third or fourth round. I really love the Alabama wide receiver, Jermaine Burton. I think he played really well at Alabama. He's got a lot of speed, and he's medium height, 6 foot, 6'1". Ran a 4.4, really good wide receiver. And then also bringing in legacy, Jerry Rice's son. I loved him as well. Brandon Rice, 6'2", 208, ran a 4.49, played with Caleb Williams. I think he has the measurables to be a really good steal as well. Those are kind of my two steals in the later rounds. Jack, do you have any from your research?
Yeah, I love Brendan Rice. It is kind of crazy when you think about the son of Jerry Rice, wide receiver GOAT, the greatest wide receiver of all time, being a sleeper. But most people have him potentially even falling to day 3 there in round 4. And of course, the Jaguars have 2 4th-round picks there right in the middle. So I think that could be a great pick. And specifically, he fills a big need of being a very good red zone threat. I think he had double-digit touchdowns this past year for USC. He's, of course, as you mentioned, Joe, he's a big dude. He can go up and get the ball. He's a good athlete. And if he has half of, his dad's work ethic, he's just going to keep getting better and better. So I like Brendan Rice. Another guy I know that you and I have texted back and forth, Joey, on that could be a steal, a small school guy, is Malachi Corley out of, I believe, Western Kentucky. And he calls himself the Yak King because he catches the ball and he just goes and gets yards. And unfortunately, Press Taylor is still the offensive coordinator and he loves screen passes. So maybe going and getting the Yak King could be a perfect fit for the Jaguars.
I don't want to supply Press Taylor with anything.
You got to. He's gonna be.
He's good. And I mentioned my guy who, Joey, you think is probably more late second, which is possible. There's so many of these guys in the second and third round that you'll certainly see some of these guys slated for the second start going in the third or fourth. But Ricky Pearsall for me, I mean, he's got NFL caliber hands. He's got some of the best catches in all of college football, including that one where he gets lit up with the one-hand jump man style catch. He also did it against good competition. So when Florida was playing against Georgia, for example, 6 catches for 99 yards against some of the other better defenses when Florida played them, he also excelled. And he typically was getting double covered in a lot of those situations. So I love to see that against good competition. These guys are rising to the equation. Obviously, I'm not getting him in the first round. I don't think it makes sense for us to take him at the second round pick where we currently are either. But if we're getting him in the third or fourth round, he's a guy that can play both outside and inside. And I think he had a great combine too, right? Didn't he run in the 4.4s?
Yeah, low 4.4,
4.1,
top 3 vertical, over 40 inches.
Yeah, so he'll go ahead of Burton, but I certainly like him more than Burton. Anais Smith from Texas A&M, I'd probably prefer over Burton too. Just what he did at Texas A&M with, I think, some really bad quarterback play over the last couple of years.
Oh no, not Nia Smith. That dude is so short. I really wouldn't want another short dude. We definitely need more height. I'm tired of under 6 foot wide receivers. Someone who's also interesting, a lot of Jags love, is the Central Florida wide receiver, Javon Baker, who's 6'1", ran a 4.54, but has super solid hands and a solid frame and can block. He's someone else who's slated in that third round, who we seem to really like, people who have come from Florida. And I think he could be really great.
Yeah. So there's a lot of wide receivers that we're keeping our eyes on. Some that I think we'll be very frustrated by, and some that will be ecstatic if we can end up. But so let's say, again, we don't end up trading up for one of the big names. We end up picking at 17 or slightly thereafter if we trade back. The other position we continually mention is cornerback or safety. What direction do you want us to see us go if that is our pick?
Oh, we don't need any more safeties. We already have Savage, Cisco, and Antonio Johnson. We definitely need cornerbacks. We have Darby, Campbell, who was hurt, and I'm scared may not be the same kind of corner as we thought he was. And then what do we have behind that? We have Christian Braswell, who the Jags really seem to like, but I haven't seen anything out of him that I would really like. We have Buster Brown, who was a solid, throw-in guy for a game or two, but I would never want him to start. So I definitely think it's cornerback for sure.
And I think corner becomes a bigger priority as well, just because of the moves in the AFC South as well. So you had the Titans, of course, go get Calvin Ridley. You had the Texans go trade for Stephon Diggs. And so you're going to see 2 times every year some big name wide receivers. And so I think if the Jags don't trade up to the top 10 and get one of the big 3, I actually love them at 17 going corner. And especially if my top 2 guys are Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback from Toledo, who has been perhaps the fastest riser in the NFL draft process, just dominated at the Senior Bowl, ran a 4.3 at the NFL Combine, has the size, speed, skills to be a CB1, or Terrion Arnold, who is super young at 20 years old and started as a freshman at Bama, which is hard to do, and started every game as a sophomore too. So if one of those 2 guys are there at 17, I love the Jaguars pulling the trigger and getting a CB1 there.
The other 2 names I've seen floated around for us is Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama as well, and Cooper DeJean from Iowa.
DeJean.
Thoughts on him?
DeJean.
Oh, sorry. And I gave him too much credit there. Cooper DeJean from Iowa.
I love Kool-Aid. I actually may have Kool-Aid over Terrion Arnold. I don't know why he got overlooked at the beginning of this part of the offseason, but he's really starting to rise again after his really good pro day. I think he's more solid than Terrion Arnold. He is already kind of solidified himself. He's bigger. He weighs 200 pounds. He's 6'1". Maybe a teeny bit slower than he is, but he can play inside and outside. I think he's a better tackler than Terrion Arnold, but Terrion Arnold does have a higher ceiling. I do believe in that. And then Cooper DeJean, I do think he's a freak athlete, but his injury really scares me. He had a really bad injury at the end of his college career. I believe it was a broken tibia. And that's just something that I don't really want to go for in the first round.
Nate Wiggins is another guy from Clemson, a cornerback. Thoughts on him?
Yeah, he ran a 4.2. He's the tallest corner of guys that's going to be selected in the first round. I think he measured around 6'2". So you can't teach height, length, speed. So all those will translate, but he is definitely the skinniest and he's the weakest tackler. And he played more zone than man. And everything we've heard from Ryan Nielsen is that he wants to play more man coverage than we have in the past. So I just don't think it's a good scheme fit. But I will say if we do go that route and he puts on 15, 20 pounds of muscle, he could be scary. But I'd rather go with some of these other guys, not Cooper DeJean, just saying.
Yeah, he's very skinny. And I watched some tape. He missed some atrocious tackles at Clemson. And we saw how bad we were kind of tackling at the end of the year. I would not want to add another poor tackler to this defense. I want someone who's going to come up and lay the lumber, knock some people out.
Yeah, Kool-Aid McKinstry is probably my favorite just because he's got the best name. If you have the balls to name yourself Kool-Aid McKinstry and go by that, then you know you are a baller out there. And so I'd love to have him in teal next year. That would be my pick. But the 2 guys you called out earlier too, Jack, with Mitchell and Arnold, I also would take. Those 3, I think, are at a tier above. So if you see any of those at 17 and we haven't made the trade up, I think we'd be very satisfied if we have one of those 3 guys.
And let me just say on Terrion Arnold, he graded with PFF as the number 1 corner against the run. So over 90 in that area was his grade. And he also is very good in coverage. I mean, he held the QB rating to about 55, going up against some of the best receivers in the business. LSU, Georgia, whether or not they're good or not, he did go up against them and other guys in the SEC. And so I think all of that is going to translate a lot better than perhaps some of these other guys who didn't always go up against elite receivers and don't have the same stats and swagger. But you could, of course, make the same argument for Kool-Aid since they played on the same team. But I have Terry and Arnold graded slightly better, being as he had 5 interceptions last year, where Kool-Aid was not as much a big play cornerback for Bama, and he also was so good tackling and against the run.
So if we zoom out, let's say we don't go corner in the first round because we go wide receiver or something else. If we're stuck picking in the second or third round for a corner, who do you guys like in that next tier that could be a day one starter?
My favorite cornerback in the second round is TJ Tampa from Iowa State. A really, really solid guy. I think he actually has the talent of a first round guy, but is projected in the second round. He's 6'1", ran in the 4.4s, 190 pounds, is super, super solid. All he did was play press coverage at Iowa State, is known for being super physical and jamming wide receivers and also having a bit of a mean streak, which I would love to see him bring to this defense for Ryan Nielsen and bring some edge to those corner classes.
1,000%. I love TJ Tampa. We're definitely on the same page there, Joey. He's one of the guys I think if he fell to 48 would be a great pick for the Jaguars. And I also love another guy you and I have talked about some before, Joey, is Max Melton, a guy from a small school. I don't know if he may fall to the third round. We may have to move up a little bit to go get him. But he's a cornerback out of Rutgers that just dominated the combine. He was rated by NFL.com as the 3rd most athletic corner in this draft class, just purely on combine results, 4.3. And we know that the Jaguars are liking speed in the secondary because the 2 guys they went out and got, Savage and Ronald Darby, are both 4.3 speed guys as well. So I think a guy like Max Melton could make a ton of sense as well for the Jaguars on day 2.
Yes, I love Max. He's actually someone that I found corners in the 4th or 5th round, and he shot up after the combine. He was definitely always in the top of the class at running, weightlifting, agility. He was super athletic, and now he's projected 2nd to 3rd round. So he would be another great grab for us in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that the Jaguars will do something with wide receiver or cornerback in the first 3 rounds, just given how deep those 2 positions are and the fact that those are 2 big positions of need for us. But when we zoom out,
we hope. You never know with Balky. I mean, who would have thought last year we'd go for a backup tight end round 2 and a backup running back round 3? So you never know. That's what makes the draft so crazy, especially as a Jags fan.
Jack, you stole my transition out of my mouth there. So zooming out. Okay, so I mentioned edge, and Joey, you're right. This is not a very deep edge class. You have 3 or 4 guys that are probably going to be top 20, top 25-ish, with Jared Verse from Florida State, Dallas Turner from Alabama, and Latua from UCLA.
Latu.
You're right. Latu. I can't pronounce some of these guys from UCLA. Clearly, I've not watched enough film on that particular guy at edge. There are a few other names in that 1st, 2nd round area. And then linebacker, offensive line, any of the other positions. Is there anybody else you want us as Jaguar fans to keep our eyes on, and you would be pretty satisfied if he ended up getting drafted by us?
Yeah, there's 3 that I really like that are in the kind of later rounds of the 2nd to 3rd round. And that would have to be Chris Braswell from Alabama, the guy that went opposite side of Dallas Turner. I think he's very, very solid. And then I love the guy from Washington, Braylon Trice. He was so good, I think. I don't know why he's projected so low, but I thought he really stood out this year at Washington. I saw his spin moves. He just looked like a natural rusher. He really performed in the big games. He has a lot of physical attributes that I think the Jags would really love and would fit well rotating in with Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker.
That's a good call out with Trice. It is kind of crazy that he's fallen so much. He was a first round pick by a lot of people a couple months ago, just on the field. I believe he led all of college football in terms of pressures. And so maybe there's some questions about measurables, but he could be a day two sleeper as well.
I mean, he's 6'4", 274. So unless he's got small hands or a small reach or some sort of other contrived knock against him, on paper, he looks like it. And he came out as a junior, which like those are the type of things you'd want to see from a breakout edge player.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he's slipping. The only other position I would call out, and we addressed this some in free agency, but I think this is more of a depth piece. I think the Jaguars need to continue to hit offensive line. It was too big of a problem in the 2023 season. Yes, Mitch Morris will come in and help the weakest position with a significant upgrade. And hopefully the offensive line staying healthier will help as well. But I think you need more depth, especially at interior offensive line. So maybe it's not a day one or even day two, but certainly in day three, I think at least one, maybe two selections for the offensive line, because you got to protect Trevor. You can't have him have 4 injuries again next year.
Yeah, offensive tackle is actually going to be really important because you don't want to keep Cam Robinson too much longer. He's getting very expensive. He seems to get hurt quite often now. And then it doesn't seem like anyone has any faith in Walker Little. Sorry to Walker Little's mother if she's still listening to us. But it just doesn't seem like we have any faith in him. And his contract's coming up next year. So we're looking at possibly not having an offensive tackle next year to go along with Anton Harrison. So getting one that could possibly turn into something is really important, I think, this draft.
Great points. The only other position that I could see us going probably more 3rd, 4th round area is linebacker. I know we got Vontrell Miller, who ended up getting injured in the offseason as an interior offensive line. But I mean, again, I'm a Gator fan. He didn't scream to me NFL caliber middle linebacker, in my opinion. So I wouldn't be shocked if we end up getting a linebacker at some point in the mid to late rounds as well.
Well, we know Balky loves linebackers, so it would not shock me if we go linebacker and, hey, why not just throw in one more tight end for good measure?
I was thinking you throw in one more running back for good measure.
There you go.
That's true too. Yeah, but there's no way you draft another running back.
No.
Period.
You never know.
You gotta hope Tank hits. But I'm excited. The draft is just a few weeks away now.
Yeah, it is right around the corner. I'm very excited to see. It's going to be a make or break draft pretty much for the Jaguars, seeing as Houston is coming out real hot with all of their offseason moves. We're going to need to fill some of these positions during the draft because we can't sustain a team that's just free agents. You can do it for a little bit, but eventually you got to pay them, and eventually they get old. So we need to hit in this draft.
That's it. Exactly. I think this is a make or break draft for the Jaguars on so many levels. Doug Peterson is on the hot seat. Trent Baalke's seat is on fire. And Trevor Lawrence's rookie deal is coming up. So you've got to make big time decisions about him this season and next offseason. So make or break draft. So I hope you're following along closely as Jaguars fans. It's going to be a big time draft. We're going to be talking about it a lot here on the podcast, but also especially on Twitter. So make sure you follow us on Twitter or X at the Jag Bros. We'll be tweeting different things. We'll be following the news of who the Jaguars are meeting with and what directions we think they may or may not go. And also follow us on YouTube as well. We've been uploading more content there too at the Jag Bros podcast. We'll drop those links in the comments. But guys, any final thoughts before we get ready for the draft in a couple weeks?
No Adonai Mitchell, please.
Go get you Brandon Ayuk. Let's get a wide receiver who's young and we don't have to draft with a question mark.
There you go. Let's see what happens. Let's see which direction the Jaguars go at wide receiver and just overall in the draft. We close this way always as three brothers, three diehard Jaguars fans getting ready for the NFL draft.
Duval.